What is going on, everyone? Welcome into our next top 10 positional breakdown for the 2023 NFL Draft. Today, we're going to be talking about perhaps the most loaded position group in this entire draft, the cornerbacks. Really excited for this one. Before we do get started, if you could just take a second and hit that like button down below. It is a free and easy way to really support my channel. I appreciate it. And we've got lots of draft content heading your way, more positional breakdowns, and some great guests lined up. We've got the NFL Stock Exchange guys loaded up for later this week. Trevor Sikkema, Connor Rogers, and then next week, we're going to be doing a mock draft with a former NFL general manager, Thomas Dimitroff. Going to be really excited to get his perspective on the draft room stuff. That's going to be a ton of fun. So make sure you are subscribed. You're not going to want to miss any of the draft content we've got headed your way here on the channel. And just one last reminder, I will be live for the entire draft weekend reacting to picks. So if you want to take out your phone, set a quick reminder to come back here on YouTube throughout the draft. I'll see you guys there. Now, before we do my number 10 player, I do want to clarify one scouting term that you are going to hear me talk a lot about in this video, maybe for every single player, and that is route squeeze. And I want to clarify what that means to me. So I want you to picture an elastic band. On one hand, you have the corner. On one hand, you have the receiver. Route squeeze to me is that in that moment when the receiver begins separating, because every receiver is going to, at some point in the route, create a point of separation because they know the direction they're going and the corner does not. Route squeeze to me is the corner's ability to have both physical and mental reaction time to squeeze that space back tight immediately. And I know it sounds simple, but the more and more corners you watch, you realize this. The really good corners, the second that receiver begins his break, it's snap, right back, reacting and squeezing that space quickly. Some guys, that receiver separates, and it takes a second for that corner to recognize the direction he's headed, or even that the ball might be headed their way, and they just kind of linger, and sometimes they don't even close the space. Sometimes the reaction time just isn't there. So that to me is what route squeeze is. I hope that made sense. But now that that is out of the way, let's talk about my number 10 corner. And it may or may not be controversial because this is a player that was really the number 1 corner back in December, and that is Keeley Ringo out of Georgia. And I'm going to go out as far as saying that I think he would be a much better safety at the next level because I think he has the size to do it at 6'2", 207 pounds. And I think he brings what you look for from a run defense perspective. And I think he can absolutely cover tight ends from a strong safety position. So if he can develop more of that intermediate zone IQ, still a young guy, I think you might be looking at a really good strong safety at the next level. So there's a lot of traits there. I mean, this guy ran like a 4.36 at his size, but that comes at the cost of some of the worst agility and change of direction and route squeeze, honestly, in this class. He just doesn't cover guys down the field as well as you want to see. The second guys begin their breaks, it's like he can be all over the place. He can lose body control. He can struggle to recover. And you also you saw him getting burnt a ton and just kind of got away with it because the quarterbacks either didn't see it or whatever. But he could have had a much worse season than he did. And I was just so underwhelmed with his tape. Now, the physical tools are great, and you want to gamble on that kind of stuff, and that's why he makes the top 10 for me. But I think this has become a much more universal opinion on him after, those very early mock drafts had him as like a first-round guy, like a top 10 guy. And I think he's, I don't see him as a top 50 player in this class. I think that's a little bit crazy. And like I said, I prefer him as a safety at the next level. And the last thing I will add on Keeley Ringo is he is a really good press jam corner in a world where a lot of these guys are playing a lot of bail, where they're showing press, but, flipping their hips and getting vertical immediately. Keeley Ringo at least has experience and technique and the size to really play that press jam coverage that there are a lot of NFL teams that are going to look for guys that are comfortable doing that. So that is a little bit of a feather in his cap that some guys in this class don't have. And again, could give him a chance to do sort of that Seattle press, cover 3, press man type of stuff at the next level. But that takes me to my number 9 corner, and it's another bigger bodied guy with like elite size, and that's Julius Brents out of Kansas State. And Brents is like extremely different as a player from what Keeley Ringo is for a wide variety of reasons. Number one is, Ringo has great long speed, but really struggles to kind of stop and start in those short areas. Whereas Julius Brents, for a big corner, actually really impressed me in terms of the short area juice department. But again, he lacks that long speed that Keeley Ringo has. So I wouldn't even really compare the two or put them in the same bucket. And the other thing with Brents is I felt like his coverage was a lot stickier. That when you talk about route squeeze and ability to react to receivers' route breaks, to anticipate what's coming, I just felt like he was so much more comfortable and understood the position so much better. And maybe that's because he is 2 years older. But I do like his floor a decent amount. And some of my comps for him are Benjamin St. Juste, who came out a couple years out of Minnesota. And he's had a hard time staying healthy for the Commanders, but he's been a really solid player when he's been out there. And another guy is Michael Davis for the LA Chargers, who, again, just a very solid starter. Doesn't sound like a ton, but Chargers fans are nodding their head like, yeah, we'd take another Michael Davis. Like, he's a really good, physical, smart player who has carved out a nice role as a number 2 corner. He was a godsend for them when J.C. Jackson went down. So to me, that's Julius Brents. I think he can really run any system. I think he can play from the slot because he did it a little bit at Kansas State, but he has some of that unique quickness. So he can be really effective in the run game. I think he can handle the short to intermediate routes that he's going to see there. And he's got great length to have some of that extra recovery and get his hands in passing lanes. But he can play on the outside as well. I think the zone coverage IQ in general is something that, similar to a Michael Davis, might just take a couple years with NFL coaching to get to a level where he's like a good cover player in zone. I felt like there were times where he didn't fully understand how his assignment kind of played into all of the other coverage players and the routes that were breaking down. Just kind of felt like there were guys that he could have been covering that he wasn't, and that's a big thing I look for in zone coverage. But I think he can go man-to-man as well as a number 2 corner. He's got that really good, tight reactionary route squeeze, but he doesn't have the long speed. So he's never going to be a number 1 guy in a man system, at least, because you're just going to have another guy that can run with some of the burners at the NFL level. But overall, just a very balanced player. Love the size, love the toughness. The only thing as well that I need to add is that he really didn't run a lot of press jam coverage at Kansas State, unlike Keeley Ringo. So there's another big difference there. When they did have him playing up on the line of scrimmage, a lot of time it was press bail. And to his credit, he's got really fluid hips. He accelerates vertically really well from press bail, so I like that. But he has the size to actually be a really good press jam corner as well, and he has the foot speed to be a really good jam corner. But I felt like his technique really let him down there, whether it was his accuracy with his punches or keeping his feet moving in press coverage, in press jam coverage. So just definitely some areas to work on for Brents, but overall, a very sound player that could really fit in for a lot of teams, especially Seattle, knowing the length that they look for at that position. And that takes me to my number 8 corner, DJ Turner out of Michigan, a very fascinating player. He lit up the NFL Combine. He had a 4.26 40-yard dash, which is up there in terms of all-time numbers. The best 10-yard split in this class. So it's not just the top speed, it is elite acceleration for him as well. A 38.5-inch vertical jump and a 131-inch broad jump. This man really helped his draft stock at the Combine. I think his tape there's nothing really truly wrong with his tape, but he was probably a 3rd-round guy before the Combine. And then I think he got himself into round 2 with this workout. Now, I will say that there are times that I think his speed actually works against him, and there's definitely times where it works in his favor as well. You are not going to beat this guy over the top. His acceleration and his speed, it's like a go ball neutralizer. But because he gets to that top speed so quickly, I think it actually works against him at times. And you'll see I have him graded with a C- route squeeze. And where I do worry about DJ Turner is really in the intermediate coverage aspect. Because when receivers run dig routes or comebackers, there's actually two things that really work against DJ Turner's ability to defend those things. I think while he has elite acceleration, I do worry about his deceleration because he's coming down from such a high-end top speed. So when he's running with a guy vertically and he either stops on a hitch or a comeback or he breaks inside on a dig route, it's just really hard for DJ Turner to throttle down to change direction and then re-accelerate into that coverage. So that's reflected not just in his change of direction, which is, I think, naturally okay, but when he's moving at such a fast speed, it's just the physics of it make it hard for him to do that. And then the route squeeze grade, it is affected by his physical ability, as I mentioned, to squeeze those areas at those route breaks. But I mentioned there's a second aspect to his game that's going to make him really struggle to defend that intermediate part of the field, and that's that he's such a slender player. So when you picture him going against not even like the Justin Jeffersons and Devonte Adams of the world, but even a guy like maybe Mac Hollins at the next level, or maybe T. Higgins, where they're so big and physical in their routes, not only is Turner going to have a harder time decelerating to squeeze those intermediate routes, but he's going to be, pushed off quite easily. And let's face it, offensive push-offs don't usually go called, and they're a very effective way for bigger bodied receivers to get open in that part of the field. So I do worry in those specific matchups how he's going to actually be able to cover a dig route, a comebacker, and I think having those limitations to cover those sorts of routes is just going to limit his upside in a certain way. But to get back to what he does well, I think when he's in a guy's hip pocket, he's got pretty good reactionary quickness, and just his recovery is just insane. Like if he takes a false step, he can get right back on track like that. So like those tools do help at the cornerback position. I don't want to say that he can't cover, because he absolutely can. He's got pretty good composure in phase to get his head around, find the ball. I think he can be a number two guy. I compare him to Jonathan Jones, who came into the league at a similar size with a great speed profile, was used as a matchup corner early on. So again, you can keep him off of those certain kind of bigger bodied guys that might give him fits and be a really good man-to-man corner. But I also felt like his zone IQ was pretty solid, coming from good coaching at Michigan. When he played off, I felt like he actually anticipated routes pretty well and knew what he was doing there. So he's not a complete lost cause in zone either. Overall, these kind of traits don't last in the NFL draft too long, and I think that's for good reason. And I think he can be a good potential starter down the road for somebody. And then we got number 7, Cam Smith out of South Carolina. And I'm definitely, a little bit lower on Cam Smith. I still like him. I think he can be a starter in the NFL. I think he'll be around my top 50, but he's consistently mocked in the first round. He's a lot of people's 5th corner off the board, and I actually disagree there. I think from a coverage perspective, I guess I'll just start with the negatives. Like, he just left a lot to be desired for me, and it's not like any department was truly bad. I think his worst trait is going to be that foot speed, though. And I think that really shows, like, when he's in a guy's hip pocket and the guy snaps off his break, I just felt like he kind of struggled to maintain that balance in his lower half to really keep pace within the first couple yards of that route break. And then the other thing is he's a more slender player. He's only 182 pounds. So just the contact balance there, if he's dealing with physical coverage down the field, he can get shoved around and be phased by contact a little bit down the field. So there's just little areas in man-to-man where I'm like, man, I didn't love that coverage. And then as far as zone goes, like, there's some high-end plays there for sure. He didn't run a ton of true zone coverage at South Carolina. I think, like we said with Brents, there's room to develop in that department for sure. And that takes me a little bit to like some of his high-end stuff and the stuff that you do like about him. And that's that first step acceleration. He's got solid speed, ran a low 4.4. I think that was the high end of what you expected there on tape. You definitely see guys pulling away from him. I will just say that. The tape speed grade was a little bit worse than the 40-yard time there, and I think you got to factor that in. But what you did see on tape was that ability to get from 0 to 60 like that, similar to DJ Turner. Cam Smith had an incredible 10-yard split as well. He had a 1.49 10-yard split, which is really impressive. So what you do see from Cam Smith is if he sees a slant coming or a screen coming, and sometimes from off coverage, if he anticipates a hitch route or an out route, if he sees it coming, he can get about 5 yards away from where he is immediately. And you see some really exciting plays there. So, that's going to help his recovery down the field if he takes a false step. It's also going to really give him potential in those sort of Fangio cover 4 systems if he can speed up his processing and really anticipate those out routes and those hitch routes. He's going to be able to fly downfield and squeeze that space quickly. So there is stuff to like about Cam Smith, and I think he's good in press coverage as well. The only thing is the foot speed, he just doesn't have good foot speed, so it can hurt him against some of those really machine gun feet type release guys like Devonte Adams, Amari Cooper come to mind. Overall, I just don't know if he's going to be a great cover player at the next level for all of the variety of reasons I discussed. Where he's going to have to make a killing is making up for some of the just coverage losses, I suppose, with playmaking opportunities and converting turnovers. My high-end comp for him is actually Marcus Peters, which is pretty high praise. I think Peters has been relatively overrated over his time in the NFL, but that's still a good number 2 corner, right? My low end is Cam Dantzler, who is similarly built, physically speaking, similar athletic traits, and he's been just kind of a cover player. Some good weeks, some bad weeks. Vikings were kind of take him or leave him on him. Could see that being Cam Smith at the next level. So he just didn't get me as excited as some of these other corners. But again, a guy in the second round, you're taking him to be a third or a fourth corner right away and a potential starter down the road. But I would not take him to be a day one starter like some mock drafts have him going. All right, number 6 is maybe the most unique cornerback prospect I have ever evaluated. Excited to talk about this player, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. 6'1", 166 pounds. This man is a twig, but there's physical benefits to it. So he's got the length. He's got the extra reach to get his hands in the way of passing lanes. He's got a really good vertical jump as well. What did he jump? 37.5-inch vert. Ran a 4.35. He is springy, he is fast, and he is long. And those are traits that work at the NFL level. And I ended up liking Forbes a lot more than I thought I would, because I saw that weight and I was initially like, nope, I'm out, before I even watched the film. But then I watched him play and I was like, I kind of get how this works. Now, he, more than maybe any player in this class, I cannot stress this point enough, has to go to a Fangio system. And if you have not seen my video on Vic Fangio defenses that I made in November, it's maybe the best video I've ever made, in my personal opinion, some of the best analysis I've had, the way that video aged with those coordinators getting fired. Please check out that video. Even though it's demonetized, I'm proud of that work. Check it out. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about when I say Fangio defense, it will go in tandem with what Emmanuel Forbes does. So he has to play off-man cover 4 coverage as a base defense. And there's about 9 teams in the league that I would imagine Emmanuel Forbes will end up with. And I'll just tell you who that is. It's Green Bay, Philly, Washington, Carolina, Arizona, the Rams, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Chargers. I will be stunned if he ends up on a different team than those options right there. So if you're a fan of those teams, pay attention. Forbes has to play in those systems because he's so lanky and skinny. Press coverage, press jam, he gets thrown around. It just doesn't work. Bump and run, stay at a guy's hip pocket, handle physical route breaks. He's not going to be able to do that. A push-off against this guy, he goes flying. So he has to play in space from those quarters, off-man systems. But if he's doing that, the traits that he has, because of his unique physical profile, honestly make him a potentially elite skill set for those systems. He's got incredible speed in a short area, the acceleration, the long speed to protect over the top as well. He's got this length. He's got 33-inch arms, I think, which is really good for the position. 32 and a quarter. That's really solid length, though not elite, but really good. And he's got really good zone IQ and route squeeze, and he anticipates from those zones. He's not just physically built to run it, he gets that stuff mentally, and that's what he did in college, and he's going to be able to do that at the next level. So if he's playing off and you run a hitch or an out route or even a slant, he can trigger, and because of his spring and acceleration to get to those areas paired with his length, he is disruptive coming downhill, and that's really hard to do from these off-coverage assignments. It's one thing to be able to protect over the top vertically, which he's going to be able to do because he's got 4.35 speed, but it's a whole nother thing to not give up the easy stuff underneath. So I really love how he fits in a quarters Fangio-style defense. He's also really functional defending the run from off coverage. Again, if he's playing press, receivers are going to run block this guy into the bench on the sideline. But if he's playing off, he's got quick feet. He can, navigate around blocks, and he's a willing run defender from there too. So I ended up liking Forbes a lot more than I anticipated, but it's got to be to one of those schemes. And if you are a press man team, if you're, the Tampa Bay Bucks, or the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, the Vikings, you're probably going to have a 5th round grade on this dude. He just cannot play in certain systems. But if you're one of the Fangio teams, I look at Arizona with, I think, the 34th pick. If they don't get a corner in the first round, that would be a fantastic pick for the Cardinals. So very unique player. Excited to see if he is kind of a trailblazer for really skinny corners, just as this system has opened things up for guys like Darius Williams and these 5'9" corners that are able to use similar skills at a different size profile to play that system. And by the way, he's got insane ball skills. By the way, I forgot to mention that. He had 33 pass breakups in his 3 years in college, which is just absurd. 14 of those were interceptions. 14 interceptions in 3 years in college. So very, very fascinating player. Excited to see how he works out. Before we get to number 5, I do want to say there's going to be players that don't make this list that you want to hear me talk about. Right now, I have full grades and evaluations and write-ups on 25 corners. That list is growing. And you can get access to those full rankings, my full draft board on my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. You'll get exclusive content as well. We're going to be starting up 7-round team-specific mock drafts very soon. And most of all, you'll support my channel in the process. This would not be possible without my amazing supporters on Patreon. So if you want exclusive draft content, you want to support the channel, you want to get access to my rankings on every player in this class, up to 350 players, come April's draft, that's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. All right, number 5, another player I'm really excited to talk about. I am higher on him. I recently mocked him 22 to the Baltimore Ravens and kind of surprised a lot of people. And then 2 days later, it comes out he's receiving top 30 visits from teams considering him in the first round, and that is Tyreke Stevenson out of Miami. He's just such a high floor player, in my opinion, for what he does. He's one of the best press man corners in this class. If you miss out on these top 4 guys, and there is a teardrop after the top 4, there's no doubt. But if you miss out on the top 4 and you still need a day 1 starter, Stevenson might be the only guy left that I trust to truly plug in and be a reliable guy. He did it for 4 years at Miami. He's just super sound in his press technique. He's got the length and strength and hand placement to be a good jam corner. He's good enough with his feet. 4.45 speed. He's not a burner, but he's got plenty of speed in there. The only real knock on him is going to be the zone stuff, where he had a lot of busted coverages. He didn't run a lot of it at Miami, but that's the most coachable thing out of all of this, right? So, and if he's going to a man-heavy system, you don't necessarily need him to be great at zone right away. He can grow into that. So, man, again, such a high floor player, kind of checks a ton of boxes. My comp for him is Chidobe Awuzie, who is a player that was a good man corner right away, but grew into some of the zone feel as his career went on, and now he's a really good, underrated, borderline number one guy. And I think that could be Tyreke Stevenson. Physically speaking, reminds me a lot of Chidobe Awuzie. So to me, I think Tyreke Stevenson belongs in the first round. I really do. It's a value position, and there's just not a ton of guys that can come in and do what he does right away. I mean, think about the guys we've talked about. You know, none of the guys we've talked about so far are guys that I trust holding up in a press man system right away. So Stevenson brings a lot of value for that. And then we've got number 4. For me, it's actually Joey Porter. Now, again, I love these top 4 guys. This is a really special cornerback class. I think all 4 of these top guys can be top 15 picks. Porter, to me, of these 3, is the lesser athlete of the 3. And I think as far as upside is concerned, his is going to be a little bit less than these other guys. But I'm totally fine, again, with Porter. If you think he's cornerback 3 or even cornerback 2, like, I could see arguments for it. He's just very sound as a player, and probably the best true press corner in this class, because he's got this crazy length. He's got these violent hands that just have stopping power when he lands them on guys. He's just very physical down the field. He's not fazed by contact, and he's got that sort of, trash talking physicality, alpha mentality at the cornerback position. I love all that. He's the son of Joey Porter, obviously, a former Pro Bowler, I believe, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, won a Super Bowl. High zone IQ, high IQ player. I think that shows up in his route squeeze, in his anticipation of routes as well. It's just the second a guy begins his break, he's right there with him in his hip pocket, understands where the receivers are trying to go, and takes those things away. He gets his head around when the ball's in the air. He's not, he is grabby throughout the route, but once the ball's in the air, I think he can play it. So there's just so much to like about Joey Porter. You're not going to really have to coach him up. He's going to be able to plug in really into any system and be comfortable. And for that reason, I compare him to James Bradbury, who, he's run man systems, he's run zone systems, he's been a really outstanding number 2 corner throughout his career, and there's been points where he's been a number 1 guy. And I think that's Joey Porter. Likewise, though, like, the long speed isn't anything special. It's certainly good enough, but it's not anything special. I think he is tall and towering, and as far as his natural change of direction and agility, things can get away from him a little bit. So I just think it might hurt his overall upside a little bit. But again, day 1 starter, top 20 player easily in this draft, and a true first-round grade, independent of system. I should say, though, one thing that did kind of bother me about him, as an aside here, is I just wish his effort in the run game was more consistent. Felt like there were games where it just didn't seem to be a priority for him. And it's not that I care that much about run defense, but when you do have that size, I feel like you can be a legitimate impact to kind of set the edge there. And I just don't think he did it consistently enough. And I'd like to see that from him at the next level. And maybe he will put his body on the line a little bit more once he's getting paid to do that. But my number 3 corner, he's been a my guy throughout this entire process. I kind of shocked a lot of people very early on when I put him 16 to the Washington Commanders before a lot of people were talking about him as a first-round guy, and that was Deonte Banks out of Maryland. And I kind of got lucky there for one reason or another. He's one of the first players I evaluated in this process. I can't even remember why that was, but it's been really fun to see that basically everybody, as soon as they get to Banks' tape, they have the same reaction, where it's like, this dude's insane. Like, he's got the size. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's got great speed. Shows that at the combine, runs a 4.36, I think. He's naturally fluid in terms of the stopping and starting and changing directions. The foot speed is awesome, whether he's in a guy's hip pocket and he's able to, keep pace and mirror route breaks, or if he's in press coverage, he can match those release patterns. Like, physically speaking, he has built in a lab profile about him. And He's physical. He gets in guys' faces. There are press coverage reps where he is just deleting guys from the play, not just slowing them, but legitimately pushing them backwards and taking them out of the play. The last thing I will say about him is, well, there's even more to say, but one of my favorite things about him is he's one of the smartest zone corners that I've watched in the last couple of years. They ran every coverage in the book at Maryland, and he was out there, communicating all game long throughout the whole season. He's just communicating, pointing, not just showing an understanding of his own assignment, but helping other guys complement what he wants to do on that play. And it never resulted in these bad coverage busts either. So I'm just like, you've got a great man corner. You've got this incredibly smart guy that understands every zone coverage in the book. They did it all, from cover 4 to cover 2, cover 3. They had him doing press bail, press jam, and he handled it all seamlessly. An incredible tackler coming downfield, probably the best true tackler in this class at the corner position. But the one knock on him, to me, is a coachable thing, and that's he doesn't know how to get his head around in man coverage. If he's playing those goal balls on the outside, he is not comfortable in phase to trust his technique, slow down, get his head around, find the ball. Sometimes that's coachable, sometimes it's not. Tyreke Woolen last year I thought was terrible at that, but by like week 4, Seattle coached it into him, and he was getting his head around and picking balls off. And because of that, it leads to a lot of boomer bust plays down the field because he resorts to grabbing when the ball's in the air. He kind of panics, can't find the ball. It didn't convert a lot of interceptions. So that is a true knock. It's why he's not ahead of our next corner. But if that can just be coached up a little bit, I think you are getting a potential true number 1 corner that can play in any system, zone, man, and be potentially elite in either of them. My comp for him is L'Jarius Sneed, who has turned into one of the more underrated players in the league over the last couple of years, who's similarly built as far as size and speed. And I think Banks will have a similarly high-end impact on his NFL team as Sneed has had. And then number 2 is Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. Talk about built in a lab athleticism. Very similar to Banks. He's a little bit slower, not by much, but taller at 6'1", and he's even more fluid. I mean, it is not fair for a 6'1" corner to have the foot speed and fluid hips that he does. You hear the term oily hips in terms of, can he open up from press and accelerate vertically? Can he, flip, click, and close downhill from off coverage, cover those spaces quickly? It's insane watching Christian Gonzalez just float around a football field in Oregon's off-zone defense where he's playing in a ton of space. And a guy who reminds me a ton of is Darius Slay, who similarly I think Slay is either 6 foot or 6'1", is just so remarkably fluid for his size. And I think in terms of zone IQ and the way he sees the game, it can be similar to Darius Slay. And that's obviously very high praise. But this is a guy that very well might go in the top 10 of the draft. I also like his physicality. I think he sheds blocks as good as anyone in this class. He's a very sound tackler. He's willing in that department. I think it's just, there were some moments of, he was getting baited on double moves. And there were some just little things in coverage that I think were learning moments for him. But man, if he gets the right coaching and the work ethic off the field is there, this guy has a chance to be a top 5 corner in the NFL. And that's obviously incredibly valuable and worth a top 10 to 15 pick. So there's just not a lot to say about Christian Gonzalez. The other thing is he didn't play a lot of true press jams. So we don't know for sure that he can be a man, a press man, physical guy up in guys' faces, but as a projection, it feels like he should be able to do that with a little bit of coaching. So to me, it's if the work ethic's there with these traits, and I think it is, you're talking about a potential top 5 corner in the NFL within the next few years. And that's obviously worth a top 10, 15 pick, and he's a really special player. There's not a whole lot else to really add on Christian Gonzalez. But he's not my number one corner, and that says a lot. Devon Witherspoon is. And Witherspoon, to me, if we could have gotten testing numbers from him to kind of confirm that he's got plus long speed, because that's the one thing for me, it's like, I'm not worried about his speed, but does he have Denzel Ward's speed, Jair Alexander's speed to protect himself vertically over the top? That'd be the one question mark. And he didn't answer those questions because he hasn't been healthy enough to work out. That's like the only thing with him, really, because he's one of the most fun watches for a cornerback. You want to talk about route squeeze, and we'll take this video full circle here. He's got the best route squeeze I think I've ever seen for a college prospect. The combination of his anticipation and his both physical and mental reaction time when the receivers begin his breaks, it's almost like he knows what the guy is about to run, because he is just in phase, like mirroring any movement that the receiver makes. And that shows up in his press coverage. His feet are just constantly working in tandem with the receiver that he's going against. I don't know how he does it. It is very much just a natural instinct that he has at the position that is paired with really remarkable fluid athletic ability that works as a complement with that. So just as a baseline, like, he just straight up covers dudes. And I know that is extremely lazy to say, but as you get through corners, you're like, hey, how about we don't leave 5 yards of separation with the guy that just ran a dig route? Witherspoon's the opposite. It's like, how do you get open against this guy? He's just incredibly sticky. So that's why he's my cornerback one. There are holes, like, didn't run a ton of like all the different zone coverages. They really just had him going man to man, because why wouldn't you? He was deleting college receivers from opposing offenses, and they could just count on that. So we don't have a ton of examples of him showing like great zone understanding, but that's very much coachable. Maybe health or size is a slight ding. Maybe it's like, why didn't he declare as a junior? These are pretty small, nitpicky things that, I mentioned the speed maybe being a slight question mark in terms of, is he going to be an elite guy? But I'm really not worried about it. Oh, and by the way, this dude is a maniac in run defense. I think the size can occasionally hold him back in terms of ability to shed and physically impose himself in the run game. But he's a great tackler. He wants to play those things. He wants to do those things and contribute that way. And he just seems to enjoy the game of football in all phases. So I love Devon Witherspoon. He is my cornerback one. And that is going to do it. Really hope you guys enjoyed. Corner is honestly, it has become over the last couple of years, maybe my favorite position, or one of my favorite positions to evaluate. So enjoyed bringing this to you guys. Again, if there's other corners that you thought were snubbed here, let me know in the comments down below, but you can get my thoughts on those players via my Patreon. You can get access to the draft rankings. It's best time of the year to sign up, get access to that. And then while we're plugging things, the next video here is going to be a interview with the NFL Stock Exchange guys, Connor Rogers, Trevor Sikkema. We're going to upload that here, but it will also be paired with our next episode of the Fully Inflated Football podcast. So if you do not follow my podcast, if you didn't know it existed, that link is in the description below, or just search Fully Inflated Football wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys there. Thank you for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. It really helps me out. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.